It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, back with Hometown Commander. And per our usual arrangement, I've brewed a deck for you, and we're here to talk about it. If you didn't see Monday's video, this week I'm trying to cover some of the starter decks that came out just a few weeks ago into the wild for $20 at your local game store or your local big box store or here on Amazon. So today's episode is based on Token Triumph, the green-white starter deck episode. I want to really quickly say, I went into this episode in particular with a lot of hope. And the reason that is because I love token decks. To the opposite of my playgroup chagrin, I love token decks because they're like putting together a puzzle, and I love that. If you've watched Monday's video, you know that I set up my deck on screen so you could see what I kept from the deck and what I added in. But friends, I do not like this starter deck. I get that the intention is to give you a deck for $20, and it is a deck for $20. But it's not even how I'd approach a token deck for $20. I know, okay, we can't play, we can't put a doubling season. We can't put a parallel lives or anything like that in a $20 starter deck. Believe me, I understand. But to be 100% honest, I don't think I even found $20 worth of cards from that pre-con that I would actually take over into the normal deck. And that was something that kind of caught me really off guard. I'm not saying that this isn't a bad product. I'm not saying that someone who wants to start with the starter deck shouldn't get this deck. I just, disagree with the commander option. I think Amara is a very bad choice for the leader of this deck. I think Tristani Discordant, who's the secondary commander for the deck, is leagues better out of the box, a better commander. Because at least you get tokens from it, and it's easier to get value with than Amara is. Amara is a 2/2 that has to tap to get a token. Now, of course, there's ways to manipulate that, but I mean, we're not going to be swinging very often with a 2/2 at a random opponent past turn 3 or 4 without getting our commander killed or destroyed, right? So what I wanted to do, what I basically said was, okay, so we're just not using either of those. I mean, I thought about Tristani Discordant, but then I was like, well, it's not like I have 18 or 20 or 30 cards that I'm taking from the starter deck and we're just adding in, right? I mean, I can count on 2 hands besides Soul Ring and Arcane Signet and that kind of stuff, cards that I was like, oh yeah, I would play that in a token deck. And so I thought what I would do is give my shot at a 5 or a 6 green-white token stack. Yes, there's going to be some money in here. We have a doubling season. We have things like that. Sure, there are going to be cards in here that are going to be a teeny bit expensive, but I think most of these cards in this deck, if you take those high-end expensive cards out, are going to be really affordable, and I think you'll still get a better base for a green-white token stack than you would be going off of that starter deck. So that being said, we're going to talk about my green-whites token list. In fact, I'm actually pretty excited about this list because I looked at this list and thought, I would play this in a game shop. Not only that, I would play this against newer players. I would play this deck against anyone I meet who maybe doesn't have those high tier powered decks that other people have. I think this deck is a ton of fun. It would probably lead to some really fun games. And so maybe this is something I consider putting together. But let's start with the mana base, because playing green-white tokens, and my favorite thing about green-white is it really doesn't need a ton of fancy lands. We don't need the fetch land. Technically, I am playing it because I still think it's worth having for the ability to correct your colors, where need be, whether you're going to get the Temple Garden or the Arctic Tree Line, or if you're just getting a basic, or you get the Canopy Vista or something like that. I still think it's worth running, but of course I can see where it's not needed. Same thing with this Wooded Bastion. Filter lands aren't needed. I mean, we really could just play 17 forests and 16 plains and call it a deck. But of course, we're going to play Command Tower. We're going to play other things. But to be honest, this is not a very expensive mana base. Besides these, the Temple Gardens and the Windswept Heath. But you take this out and just put extra basics in it, and I think this mana base still survives. We're playing Cabaret Courtyard and Broker's Hideout from Capenna, fetch lands that are going to get us a basic land, but also gain us a life in the process. Bountiful Promenade comes in on tab. Brushlands, probably not needed, but it's in here because it just got recently printed, so they're probably going to be fairly easy to find. Command Tower, of course, is going to come in any deck kit you buy. Fable Passage Again, not needed, but it's a step up over Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse, so we're playing it instead. But I think it's a pretty safe, pretty cheap mana base. Coming up into the enchantments, I think enchantments are one of the most important card types in a tokens deck, because so many enchantments either give you tokens, contribute to the amount of tokens that you make, or help you kind of get some value with your tokens. And so to be 100% on this, if there's any portion of this deck that I would recommend you spend the most time into, it would be first enchantments, and then when we go up to the creatures are also very important as well. So getting into the enchantments, Anointed Procession is hands down one of the single most important enchantments in this deck, doubling the amount of tokens we would create. This is a very good card and the linchpin to every single token strategy. Now, there's other ways to do this. We have other cards that double tokens too, but Anointed Procession is probably the single best one of these cards. Now, Doubling Season exists, but Doubling Season does two things. It does that, and it does +1/+1 counters, which tends to, you see, it roofs the price of Doubling Season. We don't need Doubling Season, though. It's just in here because we can run it, and we will want to run it to double our tokens as well. Battle for Brittagard makes us tokens on 1 and 2, and then basically copies every creature token we have. And that's great on the 3 because that just dumps more tokens in, gives us more value, and it can do a lot of more things for us. Beastmaster Ascension is one of our ways to end the game. We're going to go wide, attack with a bunch of creatures, turn Beastmaster Ascension on, make those 1/1s into 6/6s or whatever they are into +5/+5 from that, and just try to end the game. The goal of every Green White's tokens deck is to go wide and then attack to end the game. Now, your Naya tokens deck, when you add a red, you get things like Impact Tremors and things like that to start damaging your opponents when creatures come in. But we don't really have as much of access to that in Green White. So we're really just trying to go wide and protect our creatures and then attack and end the game. Cathar's Crusade, another great way to end the game, and another one of the big must-need enchantments for a tokens deck. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a counter on each creature you control, including the one that came in. So if I make 5 1/1 creature tokens and they come in, I put 5 +1/+1 counters on all my creatures. You can see where this is going to get out of hand very quickly as soon as you add in a trample enabler or something like that. Cryptolith Right is going to allow all of our creatures to tap for a mana. Then the tokens that we have come in, the turn that they come in won't have haste, but every turn after that we'll be able to tap them for mana, do different things with them, and Cryptolith Right is just great because it's going to allow our tokens to pay for other spells, our tokens to pay for other creatures. One of my favorite things to do with Cryptolith Right is, let's say our tokens have vigilance. Our tokens are attacking with vigilance, or they have a way so they don't have to tap. And we're using these protection spells like Heroic Intervention or Grand Crescendo or Flawless Maneuver. And let's say our opponent, on an opponent's turn, let's say we attack with our vigilance, and on our opponent's turn, they try to wipe the board. Well, we can tap our tokens to play these spells and just protect our board. Or play things like Second Harvest or these other things, and we'll get to those in a second. So basically, we can pay our tokens forward to give us more value, and I think that's indispensable in a deck like this. It is one of the most important things you can do, and you need to be paying attention for it. Divine Visit, I almost said Divine Intervention. Divine Visitation, another great token deck card, because instead of making the tokens originally we make 4/4 angels with flying instead. And this is going to take every single 1/1 we would make it a 4/4 angel, which is harder for our opponents to block because it's in the air and it's worth more, right? It's a 4/4 instead of a 1/1. And Divine Visitation will help us end the game faster. We talked about Doubling Season. Feldar Retreat kind of takes a multi-approach step to landfall. So it says whenever land enters the battlefield under control, that's landfall. Plus, you either get a 2/2 cat, or you put a counter on each creature you control, and those creatures get vigilance until end of turn. A lot of people don't forget that it says they get vigilance until end of turn, which is really good because once you put Feldar Retreat down, you're probably putting a land down every turn, especially in a deck like this. So it's basically going to allow you to keep attacking with all your tokens and then keeping them up to block. Sure, they would lose their vigilance, as soon as your turn's done, but then they're still untapped, ready to block, and they kept that +1/+1 counter. So this is kind of a less good Cathar's Crusade, but it's still very good because you can stack them and you can do other things with them. Garruk's Uprising is going to give all of our creatures trample. When it comes in, if we have a creature with power 4 or greater, we draw a card. But then the next part is whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, we draw a card. Well, if we have this in Divine Visitation out, every time we create a token, we're drawing a card. Or anytime, we create an angel through something else, or anytime we do a bunch of other things, we're going to draw cards. This is going to refill our hand, let us have more resources to throw out, and kind of go wide and widen in the game. Inspiring Leader, one of my new favorite cards from last year from Commander Legends 2. Says commander creatures you own have creature tokens you control get +2/+2. So in order to use a background, we have to have our commander out on the battlefield. And if we have our commander out on the battlefield, all of our creature tokens get +2/+2. It's going to make them harder to deal with, especially if we're dealing with angels in the air. But they just get bigger, they get better, and they become more fun. Intangible Virtue, +1/+1 in vigilance for all of our tokens. Now our tokens get to attack for free, probably, and now we can keep them back to block. Mirari's Wake, flat 1/1 to all of our creatures, but now all of our land taps for an additional mana of any type that it produced. This is great because it's going to take our 6 lands and make them into 12 mana or whatever it is. The cool part is Mirari's Wake is a lot cheaper than it used to be, so it's not even that expensive of a card anymore. But this is one of those cards where if we can get it out on turn 3 or 4 if we're ramping, or even on turn 5 if we're going standard, Mirari's Wake will immediately make it better. Because let's say we play this on turn 5. We play a land each turn, but we get a few little things out. Then we hit Mirari's Wake on turn 5. Now on turn 6, we're untapping with 10 mana instead of 5. And the longer Mirari's Wake stays out without getting checked, the worse and worse it's going to get for your opponents as you just stack value. Paladin class, one of my favorite cards for go wide decks, because for 1 mana, you're going to tax your opponents to play things on your turn. For an added 3 mana, you get a flat +1/+1 bonus to all your creatures. And then for 5 mana, you get whenever you attack until end of turn, target attacking creature gets +1/+1 for each other attacking creature and double strike. Well, if we have a creature that's in the air, has menace, has trample, has anything that we could have, we pick it. It gets a giant buff, gets double strike. We could even give this to our commander, maybe, if that's something that we want to do. And with Queen Allenal, who we've chosen as our commander, we might want to do that because we could actually win the game with commander damage depending on how wide we've gone. So I like Paladin class. I think it's well worth the 1 mana, and getting up to 4 mana for the flat +1/+1 to me makes it a little bit more worth it than just playing like a straight glorious anthem, because once you get it up to that 5th level, 3rd level, if you have enough mana, it just becomes way better in my opinion. Rabble Rousing, one of my favorite token enchantments. Hideaway 5s, when it comes in, we're going to look at the top 5 cards, exile one of them underneath Rebel Rousing, and then it says whenever you attack with 1 or more creatures, you get that many 1/1s. So if we swing our tokens out, let's say we swing with 6 tokens, or 6 creatures in general, we get 6 1/1 tokens. So in my opinion, the tokens kind of replace themselves in case... but a lot of times, maybe we're swinging with 1 or 2 creatures because we want to get counters on our Beastmaster Ascension, or we want to get some value by just getting in for some little damage, or maybe we want to try to make some trades with our opponents. The best part here is those tokens just immediately get replaced, and then after you create the tokens, if you have 10 or more creatures, you can play that card without paying its mana cost. The only non-bow with Rabble Rousing that you need to remember is Beastmaster Ascension gets the counters on attack declaration. So if you put a Beastmaster Ascension under Rabble Rousing and you attack with 7 creatures, let's say, which would normally activate Beastmaster Ascension, well, because Beastmaster Ascension wasn't out when you declared the attack, it won't get the counters even if you play it for free off of Rabble Rousing. So that's kind of the only non-bow in the deck that you kind of care about when it comes to Rabble Rousing. I think everything else you're fine play with. A little bit of a more expensive card, but a card that I think adds a ton of value to our deck is Reconnaissance. This is an old card that can look kind of confusing, but basically it gives our creatures vigilance. So how it's worded is remove attacking creature you control from combat and untap it. This creature neither deals or receives combat damage this turn. The only way I can explain this without going really deep into the rules and the archaic way that this is written. So after damage is dealt, there's a final passive priority around the table before you exit combat into the second main phase. Well, Reconnaissance, basically on that priority check around the table, you can pay 0 to untap every single creature you just attack with that dealt damage, and then they're untapped for your main phase 2. So basically, you're going to take that moment before before you go out of combat, untap all of your creatures, and now they've effectively gotten vigilance. No, they're still tapped for the purposes of other abilities, but you're basically going to get to untap all of them coming out of combat. Smothering Tithe, giving us that extra mana, and then True Conviction, giving all of our creatures double strike and lifelink is very good in a token deck because the wider we go, the better this card becomes, and we don't mind getting all that extra life. Getting into the artifacts, the deck did have Arcane Signet, Salaza Signet, Soul Ring, and I believe it actually did have the Talisman, although the Talisman is fairly useless in green-white because we're going to play ramp. But the cards we've added in here are a ton of fun. Halo Fountain is a extra win the game condition for 5 white and untap 15 tap creatures you control. We can win the game. So if you take a nice big attack with a bunch of tokens and they all survive, we can untap them to win the game. But the thing I like doing with this are the first 2. 1 white, untap, tap creature you control, make a 1/1. This just allows us to make incremental tokens over the course of the game, or for 2 white, untap 2 tap creatures we control, draw a card. And the best part about Halo Fountain is then that creature can block, or those 2 creatures for drawing the card can block. So it's like we're just getting value. We're also kind of getting ourselves some protection as well. Horn of Valhalla makes a ton of tokens on the sorcery adventure side. And then when it comes in, it gives you an equipment that buffs a creature for each creature you control. Not each attacking creature, just each creature you control. Scepter Celebration, one of my favorite cards from the Commander decks. Creature gets +2/+0 Trample. I think this is a perfect card for our commander. Since our commander gets bigger for each creature we control, this just makes it even better. It says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 citizen creature tokens. So now we're getting all of that value back. We're making more and more tokens. I think this is going to keep us going wider and wider and wider, right? That's the goal. Skull Clam, we can attach this to a 1/1. That creature dies and draws us 2 cards, and that just allows us to kind of refill our hand and keep things going. Strixhaven Stadium, it's a card that taps for a single colorless, which isn't actually most of the time what we're using it for. What we're really using it for is this concept of point counters that it uses. So whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we get a point counter. And if it hits 10 point counters after a combat, the player that we damage that turn loses the game. So this is kind of an alternate win condition if we can go wide enough to take out one of our opponents. Now, if an opponent were to hit us with a creature, we lose a point counter off of Strixhaven Stadium. So it's kind of this back and forth that we get to play with. But I think it will add into a little bit of fun. Throne of the God Pharaoh, at the beginning of the end step, for each opponent loses life equal to the number of tap creatures you control. This isn't damage. This can be prevented. This is just losing life. I mean, it can be prevented, but you know what I mean. It's Throne of the God Pharaoh has done a lot of work for me in some other decks where you swing with 10 creatures, your opponents may block them, or they may take some little 1/1s. They go, oh, okay, it's just 2 coming at me or 3 coming at me. I'll take it. And then you get to the end step, okay, everybody loses 10, and they're like, what? And so very quickly, this is just going to start ending games because you're just going to have to deal with your opponent. Your opponent's going to go, wait, how many creatures are tapped? You have 20 creatures, or you have 15 creatures tapped, and then they have to figure out how to deal with this. Now, this can be a non-bow with Intangible Virtue or things like that give us vigilance when we attack, but that's why I think stuff like Cryptolith Rite is so important, so we can tap those creatures down if we have a Throne of the God Pharaoh and take advantage. And then Thunderhawk Gunship, the only vehicle we're throwing in here just because it makes tokens when it comes in, but whenever it attacks, attacking creatures you control get flying until end of turn. So you're basically giving all of your creatures flying on top of anything else you've given them, and we only have to crew it for 2, and that's going to be very easy with either our commander or any of the tokens that we have. Getting into spells, let's talk about our sorceries first. A lot of ramp. Lot of ramp. We definitely want to go quick. We want to get as much mana as we can quickly so we can get into our big things. We're playing Awaken the Woods, a new card from Brothers War for some ramp. Cultivate, Explore, Farseek, Kadama's Reach, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, 3 visits. And this is another reason why 3 visits and Nature's Lore are another reason why we're playing some of those lands that have dual typings, even though they come in tapped. And same thing with Farseek. Farseek can only go get a plains. So we're going to go get one of those tapped dual lands. Same thing with Nature's Lore and 3 visits. They can go get forest cards. That doesn't say forest basics, although we could, but we could go get a type a land that has a forest type. So we're going to go get those dual lands, have them come in tapped. And so on turn 2, instead of getting a basic land, we could go get a dual land that has 2 different types. And so now we're kind of building our mana base as it goes forward. Join the Dance, I just really like on turn 2, we can make 2 tokens, or we can flash it back and make 2 tokens. You never quite know when you might need a Cathar's Crusade trigger or something like that. So I really like Join the Dance for that reason. We're playing Martial Coup, making X 1/1 white soldier creatures to, and then if X is 5 or more, we have to destroy all other creatures. So Martial Coup can kind of be a downside if you have a giant board. You definitely don't want to go 5 into Martial Coup. But if all your opponents have creatures and you don't have any, then we definitely want to go 5 into Martial Coup, get the tokens, nuke the board, and push ourselves forward. Triumph of the Hordes, another one of our win cons. Giving all of our creatures trample and infect. The way infect works is creatures deal damage to other creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters, which can get around indestructible. And then to players, you give them poison counters, and as soon as a player has 10 poison counters, they lose the game. So I think Triumph of the Hordes is a great win con for us. We're also playing Overrun as well. This one only gives them +3/+3 and trample, but if we have a wide enough board, we are just going to hurt our opponents. Pest Infestation destroys up to X target artifacts or enchantments, and then makes us twice X 1/1 pests, and then Awaken the Woods makes us 1/1 Dryad land creature tokens that are also forests. So they're 1/1 creatures, and they can tap for green mana, and that's absolutely massive. Here in the middle, Beastmaster Ascension, Swords to Plowshares, and Path to Exile for some removal. Aldamri's Call for a little bit of creature search, because there are some of our creatures in our deck that are really good. Flawless Maneuver, Grand Crescendo, Heroic Intervention are protection. Each of them will give all of our creatures indestructible. We can play with Flawless Maneuver for free if we control our commander. March of the Multitudes can make tokens, and the cool part is it has Convoke, an ability where we can tap our creatures to pay for mana for the spell. So if we have a giant board of creatures, we can make even more creatures. And then Second Harvest goes ahead and just straight makes a copy of each token we control, which is great. It's not like Populate, where it's like we have to pick a creature token and then make a copy of it. Second Harvest just straight copies everything. And then Secure the Waste, instant speed, X white, make X 1/1 white warriors. So this comes in a lot of handy if you have some spare mana on your opponent's turn, or if you can use your Cryptolith right to just tap all your creatures, make a bunch of 1/1s. Okay, so wrapping up, we got the creatures, getting into our creatures here, and we really just want to have a good mix of token producers and then ways to either buff our tokens or end the game. Adeline is a star 4, where star is the number of creatures you control, and whenever you attack for each opponent, you get a 1/1 tapped and attacking that player. Adeline does not have to attack for that ability to go off. It just goes off no matter what. Bess is a ton of fun and was another one I thought about being the commander for this deck. Whenever one or more other creatures with base power and toughness 1/1 enter the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Bess. And whenever Bess attacks, each other creature you control with base power and toughness 1/1 gets +X on all the time, where X is the number of counters on her. The reason the card says base power and toughness 1/1 is because if it just said whenever a 1/1 creature comes in the battlefield, well, if I have an intangible virtue out, that creature actually comes in as a 2/2, and then I wouldn't get that ability. But with Bess saying base power toughness, I would definitely get that ability. And so Bess does a very similar thing. So Bess is great because then she's just going to pump all of our tokens when we attack, kind of like another little mini Beastmaster Ascension, depending on how many creatures we've had come down. Kadira comes down and it has trample, and whenever it deals damage to a player, we get 1/1 white rabbit tokens. So kind of like that Scepter, whenever she deals damage to somebody, we get that many 1/1s, and it's just going to keep our strategy going forward. Champion of Lambhold, one of the win cons of this deck, because it says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, it gets a +1/+1 counter. And then it says creatures with power less than Champion of Lambhold's power cannot block creatures you control. So if Champion of Lambhold's a 7/7, no creatures with 7 or less power, or 6 or less power, can block any of our creatures. And so if we can get Champion Lambhold up to a 10 or 11, it pretty much means our opponent cannot block us, so we should be able to end the game very quickly on a nice big attack. Craterhoof, one of the most well-known green finishers, coming down, giving our creatures +X/+X, and trample until a turn where X is the number of creatures we control. The wider we go, the better Craterhoof is, and the more it probably just ends the game. Another one of those big pricey creatures, an Elish Norn, grants a Cenobite. It's kind of funny because we just saw a new Elish Norn, but this is the old one. All of our creatures get +2/+2. All of our opponent's creatures get -2/-2, and she has vigilance. I look at Elish Norn as more of a kind of an enchantment of sorts than as a creature. It just comes down, it's going to make all of our opponents' creatures smaller. This was something like Champion of Lamholt could even make our opponents' big creatures not be able to block us. Gala Greeters, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under control, we get to choose one that hasn't been done. So this happens up to 3 times per turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on it, create a tap treasure, gain 2 life. It's just a very cheap card, but I think that it can just gain us that incremental value, especially those treasures, if we can get at least 1 per turn. King Darien, giving all of our creatures +1/+1 for 5 mana. We can put a counter on it and get a token, which we're not going to use very much, but we're going to use a lot as the last ability. Sacrifice it. Creatures you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So opponent tries to play a board wipe, makes a big attack. Let's say we need to block with all of our tokens to stop us from losing the game. We sacrifice Darien, give all of our creatures indestructible, hopefully take out their creatures, and then we're in a way better position than we were before. Maya, bird card protector. Other creatures get +1/+1, and whenever a land comes in, we get a human warrior. So this is kind of like Feldar Retreat, except instead of the choice, we just get the 1/1 Prava, one of the better creatures in this deck. As long as it's your turn, creature tokens you control get +1/+4. So it's going to make them harder to chump block and destroy by blocking. You know, if we have a 2/2 and our opponent blocks with a 5/5, well, of course they're gonna destroy our 2/2, right? But if we have a 2/2 with Prava out, that becomes a 3/6, and now that 5/5 can't just block us and kill us. It'll actually do a lot better. And then for 4 mana, we can make a token, but it's going to be very rare that we use that to our advantage. I think more often than not, we just want it for that first ability. Scoot Swarm, one of the better token producers over the long term. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, make a 1/1 insect, or if you have 6 or more lands, make another copy of Scoot Swarm. It just gets incrementally large. It gets parabolically large, and it gets massive. And it's a ton of fun to watch a bunch of Scoot Swarms go off. Tindershoot Dryad, one of my favorite token producers from Ixalan. Beginning of each turn, we make a 1/1 sapling. And this is cool with any of those token doublers because we just get that many more. And then it has Ascend, which says if we control 10 or more permanents at any point in the game, we get Ascend, and we keep Ascend for the rest of the game. It says if we have the City's Blessing, which is the Ascend, all saplings get +2/+2. So now our board of saplings just gets bigger and bigger. Torrens, whenever we cast a creature spell, we make a 1/1. Again, we don't have a ton of creature spells in the deck. If you think about it, 14 isn't a lot out of 100, but it's enough. And so Torrens will just give us a few more tokens. And then they have training, which means if they attack alongside a creature that has a higher power than them, they get a +1/+1 counter. And Torrens is almost always going to have a less power than some of our other creatures, but those 1/1s have training as well, so they're going to kind of keep getting bigger and bigger. And then Wayfaring Temple, it's just a star for the number of creatures we control, kind of like our commander. And then whenever it deals damage to a player, we populate, so we create a token that's a copy of a token we control. So Wayfaring Temple just seems cool as a blocker, it seems great as an attacker, and as soon as we give it trample, it just becomes really good. And then our only Planeswalker, Elspeth Sun's Champion, her +1, when she comes down immediately, can put 3 1/1 soldiers down. -3 can destroy all creatures of power 4 or greater. This is really great because it's kind of a one-sided board wipe if we don't have a lot of those buff enchantments down. And then -7 says creature tokens you control have +2/+2 and have flying. So we can tick her up a couple times and protect her. Then all of our creatures get flying. We could probably end the game that way. I really like this deck because I think this deck sits in an interesting spot. How it currently sits, I think it's probably a 4 or 5, but I think with just a few more additions to it, we could probably get this deck a little bit higher up on the power scale, and could be a deck that could start to contend with some of your better creature decks. This is not a combo deck, so we're probably not going to be able to hold up to the combo, the 8s and 9s of the world that are pure combo decks that are probably going to do things quicker than us. But I think the one thing I really like about a deck like this is it's going to stop your opponents really from being able to run over you because of how many creature tokens you're going to create. And I think just by taking out a few cards and adding in a few more cards, this deck can just get better and better and better and be a fun deck. Now, I am making this deck before we are finished seeing all the Phyrexia spoilers. And I will tell you that there are already a few Phyrexia LB1 spoilers that would make this deck better, that would go immediately into the slots and make this deck better. But I didn't want to put them in here yet because we haven't seen the whole set yet. And so I think that's a great place to start. There are a couple white cards in that set that are going to be pretty bonkers good in this deck, just to make it even better. And we even get another Anointed Procession type effect in Phyrexia LB1, so keep your eye out for that, because that's a card that will immediately go in this deck and make it better. But guys, that is my Queen Allenal of the Ruadach. I just realized I don't think I told you guys what she does. She's a star where stars the amount of creatures you control. And then anytime you would make creature tokens, instead you make those plus a 1/1 soldier. So you just get an extra token every time you create tokens. But I think she's the perfect commander of this deck because the wider we go, the better she is. And then she runs the risk of killing people with commander damage, because at the end of the day, if we have 20 creatures, she's a 20/20. So, and then she can always come down because she always counts herself. So we don't have to worry about bringing her down into an empty board and her dying or anything like that. Same thing with Wayfaring Temple. So what do you guys think of my green-white tokens list? Is this something you guys would run? Is this something that you think you could take to your shop? Because I think this is a deck that would do fairly well in a random shop. Sticking in with some of the other decks. I mean, the only downside of this deck would be we don't have a ton of flyers, but you could very easily put in Luminarch Ascension, Starnheim Unleash, Entreat the Angels. You could find a way to work in some of those angel producers and kind of get yourself against some of those flying metas. Yes, we're playing Divine Visitation, which will give us the 4/4s, but I'm saying there's other ways we can make 4/4 angels that would kind of protect us against those flying lists. But I think against any other ground list except Hydra's lists, which are just going to have trample, I think we're going to do a pretty good job at combating most of those lists. And I think this could be a ton of fun, to the point that I think I'm going to start tinkering around with this some more personally, taking out some of this, adding my own stuff to it. And maybe this will grace the test box, and maybe this will be something that I try out, because as much as I love Jetmir, my Naya tokens list, it's not built to be a true go wide list. It's built to be a get to 9, put Jetmir down, win the game list. And I think it'd be a lot of fun to do this big go wide, have fun kind of atmosphere. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Drop me a like if you like the list. Let me know down in the comments what you think of the list. Is there anything you would add? Is there anything you would change? What do you think of something like this? Am I overblowing this, or do you think it's worth running? And I will catch you guys next time.